Bill Girten here from Brain Children, welcoming you to another webinar, this one titled Develop Once, Run Everywhere. By the end of this presentation, you will be able to see the paradigm that is starting to take off inside of mobile apps development, whereby you can develop your application with some very clever techniques that will allow you to develop at one time and run it across different platforms, different devices, different forms, and I'll explain all that in due course. I'm also going to be able to demonstrate an application that I'm going to write for an Android device and be able to pick it up, drop that code inside of an iOS development environment, and be able to run it and have the same identical results. So let's get started. As you know, there are many different platforms that comprise smart devices, whether they be tablets, whether they be handheld smartphones. In manufacturers, different manufacturers have different types of devices that cover different operating systems. For instance, inside of iOS, even though 6.0.1 was released a little over a week ago at the time of this recording, still there are plenty of devices out there that are still using the 5.1 version of the iOS operating system. Inside of Android, there's a lot of fragmentation. We have Froyo, which is 2.3.x. We have Ice Cream Sandwich, which is more prevalent now in new devices, and we're right on the heels of Jelly Bean. So even though there are plenty of Android devices out there, there's still a lot of support for different versions of the operating system inside of Android. BlackBerry has several operating systems as well. I'm not really sure what the most current release is. I sort of lost touch with the BlackBerry camp earlier in 2012, mainly because they decided they were going to be moving on to BlackBerry 10. It's anybody's guess as to what's going to happen in the first quarter of 2013, let alone whether or not RIM BlackBerry is going to make their target for releasing their new products. So I really can't help you out there. As far as the Windows Phone is concerned, WinPhone 7 has been out there for a while. WinPhone 8 is more prevalent now. It's more modern since the Windows 8 platform just was released within the last 30 days from the point I started to record this. So as you can see, there are multiple platforms for multiple devices. As a result of that, even within camps, even within the Apple camp, the Google camp, you have a traditional presentation versus a Retina display. Right now, typically in, let's say, an iPhone 4 versus an iPhone 3GS or an iPhone 5, an iPhone 3GS will have a pixel density of 72 dots per inch, where Retina is doing 144 dots per inch. The Android phones come in all different types of densities, depending upon the manufacturer's implementation of the Android operating system and how crisp or how non-crisp their display is. You might have varying types of densities, and so as a result of that, it's problematic in trying to figure out the best way to lay out your real estate when it comes to your mobile application. For Windows, you have Windows phones, you have the Surface tablet that was just recently released, so you have different types of not just devices, but how you can lay out your application to run that mobile application on that device. So for IT shops, that presents all sorts of development troubles. For instance, inside of the iOS, you have different what they call zip files. They used to be called nib files, but they're called zip files, or XML files that represent the real estate of your application for that device. iPad's got its own separate set of zip files from the iPhone. Even inside of the Xcode development environment where you do storyboarding, they need to know whether or not you're storyboarding for the iPhone or the iPad, and so you have different layouts even within the iOS camp for different devices. Android's no better. Depending upon the density you're going to put inside of the appropriate folder, the XML file that represents your layout, your screen layout for your mobile apps based upon density. And on top of this, the other trouble you have here when developing mobile apps in order to handle events that occur at this front end, at this presentation layer. You have event handling that is unique to that particular platform. So you might have callbacks that are unique only to Apple or for iOS, and you might have callbacks that are only unique to the Android. And so as a result of that, it's not like you can develop the event handling one time and distribute it to whether or not you have an Android or an iOS or a Windows device. It doesn't matter. Each particular manufacturer, each particular device has its own way of interacting with the user. We also have runtime limitations. These the zip files, just because you put them on an iPhone, won't scale to an iPad. As I discussed a little bit earlier, you have a separate zip file for the iPad versus the iPhone and the iTouch. Android is, since you're limited by the pixel densities, you're also limited by not just the levels of those pixel densities, but how the particular manufacturer implemented the specification, that Android specification. So what might look good on an HTC might look terrible on a Samsung, might look great on a Nokia, and it might look horrible on a Nexus. So it all depends upon how closely a manufacturer adhere to the Android specification. These zip files I talked about earlier, you can't take them and pick them up and drop them into an Android or a Windows Phone development environment for a mobile app, because it's only unique to Apple. And those artifacts that are inside of, let's say, the window camp or the bota camp or whatever, you can't pick them up and drop them into Apple or into an Android development environment for the mobile app as well. So you have these limitations. The other thing too that is something a lot of people might overlook or might not be aware of is Android as an example. When you submit your app, your mobile app to Google Play, inside of what they call the manifest, you're determining what kind of pixel density your particular app will run at. So if you don't have a pixel density, let's say, that matches a particular version of an HTC phone or a Nexus phone, even though your app is out there and is completely searchable inside of Google Play, it will not come up as being a result of the search because you're out of the game with pixel density. So if you're on an HTC device, and let's say, for instance, it requires high pixel density, but your app doesn't have that high pixel density, as a result of that, if an individual searches for your app on that HTC device out in Google Play, it will not come up in the list of results, and completely taking your presence out of the game, which can be problematic for people that want some exposure in Google Play, only because you're limited by the pixel density, which can be a little bit of a challenge at times, but it can also be somewhat depressing because you realize you worked hard on this, and because your particular app doesn't have a specific device, and that's, again, can be based on the manufacturer, your exposure then is somewhat limited. You also have these, what I call silos of talent, where the iOS people don't understand the Android developers are developing in Java, so there might be some, let's say, business logic that a subject matter expert, an SME, can easily go from one particular camp to another camp, but because that Android developer doesn't understand how to best map it out in Objective-C, how to make best use of pointers and so forth in the heap, as a result of that, it's very difficult to cross-train. So what you do is you typically, for mobile apps development in IT shops, you'll be able to have a subject matter expert in, let's say, one particular camp that can't easily go over to another camp. So now you have subject matter experts that have to move above the fray of, let's say, geeks, if you will, and be able to convey that information based upon those particular silos of talent. So the .NET developers don't understand the iOS developers, which the iOS developers don't understand the BlackBerry developers, and that can be problematic. For an IT manager, it's almost tantamount to herding cats, and very difficult to herd cats for sure. So what we want here is the road to consistency. And the road to consistency, in my opinion, it comes down to 4 key ingredients. The first 3 were covered in my previous webinar. Create a mobile app in 60 minutes. I have it out there, which I'll give you the link in a few minutes. But out under www.brainchildren.net, you'll see on the home page there's a link there to webinars. Feel free to go through there and create a mobile app in 60 minutes. I covered the first 3 points on this current slide, which is you're using the HTML to frame your mobile app, how you want your mobile app to look, what that presentation layer should look like. You're using the cascading style sheets, the CSS, to provide a decoration, to make it look beautiful, to give it sort of a little bit of character, to make it look professional, or you might want to make it, might want to loosen it up a little bit, depending upon what your particular need is. The CSS really gives you the artistic flair for your mobile app, and one of the items that is really big now inside of CSS is this thing called responsive design, where you design your app to look a particular way, and whether it's in a browser that's being rendered on a desktop computer or a laptop, or whether it's through a tablet or it's through a handheld device, it doesn't matter. It will automatically adapt to the form for that particular device without having to write the CSS for different types of devices. CSS is a responsive design framework. There's one out there called Grid that will automatically adapt to those particular forms. I invite you to go out there to Google or to Bing if you're a Bing fan. Go out there and search it and look for the CSS framework called Grid as an example. There are plenty of other ones out there, but I've been using Grid with great success. The third key ingredient is JavaScript. As I said before, the event handling usually is determined by the device's manufacturer or the implementation of the operating system for that manufacturer. So as a result of it, you might have swipe gestures available inside of an iOS device such as an iPad or an iPhone, and that same swipe gesture might not be available, let's say, on a Nexus tablet, or it might not be available on a Nokia phone. But in any event, we can use JavaScript to basically handle that, or more or less write that event handling one time and be able to use it across all platforms. And I'm going to show you a demonstration on how to do that in a few minutes. The fourth and key, one of the most key ingredients here is the cross-platform framework that will allow us, through that JavaScript event handling, to talk to these low-level device features. They're typically called plugins. The plugins will allow you to get down to really low-level stuff such as the accelerometer, and that's something that you cannot easily get to through the JavaScript layer, because that's really exposed through the browser, typically for IT people that are familiar with that on the client side, and what you're asking to get to is some sort of a feature that's down binary-wise at the low level for that particular device. I'm going to show you there's a cross-platform framework that will allow you to do that. And the framework that will go across these platforms is Cordova. It was once known as PhoneGap, a Canadian company back in the day called Nitobi. They were named Nitobi before Adobe bought them, another Canadian outfit. And what they did was they took PhoneGap and they were able to glean from that an open source version. It was recently, I'm pretty sure it came out of incubation from the Apache Foundation, but it's definitely an open source project, so it's a free download. It's going to be maintained for free for quite a while. The overall aim of Cordova and PhoneGap, but really more Cordova, is that someday it's going to go away, because what they're pushing for, what the founders are doing, they're trying to push it so a lot of these features that are available through Cordova are ultimately blended into HTML5, which is an evolving standard. It's gonna be evolving for a few more years to come, but for the time being, this open source freebie will allow you to talk to the low-level features of the device. As you can see here in the lower section of the slide, all of these items here, these features, whether that's the accelerometer like I mentioned, geolocation, whether or not you want to check to see if a Wi-Fi network is available, all of these things are accessible through Cordova via making a couple of directives inside of a JavaScript function. And I'll show you that in a few minutes. So let's polyfill, which is more or less, it was called PhoneGap because they were more or less filling out these different areas that really were lacking as far as being able to access these features on these devices. So what I want to do here is take you through a demonstration where we're going to create an Android project. It's going to be leveraging the previous webinar's project, which is create a mobile app in 60 minutes. I invite you, since this is a recorded webinar, to go out and visit this particular web page. It's got links on there, a real cornucopia of great tools to download and to leverage, editors, some tutorials if you want to get more skilled, let's say in jQuery or JavaScript. Plenty of helpful links out at that particular page. Down towards the bottom, you'll see that there is a developed project you can download completed, as I demonstrated in my previous webinar. Feel free to download that, and because we're going to be using that as a base to develop this Android project, and we're going to be able to pick up that Android mobile app. We're going to create an iOS template, if you will, a template project, and we're going to drop that Android code that we develop right into iOS, and it's going to run, and it's going to look the same. It's going to be dynamite. So anyway, feel free to download that. If you need to pause this recording at this point in time in order to do so, and then resume later, feel free. If you need to get PhoneGap, go out to phonegap.com. There's a download there. Even though it's still, again, referred to as Cordova, it's still free of charge to go out and download that. And they have getting started guides on their page that will give you step-by-step instructions on how to not only download it, but to actually get started and create a Cordova project. So let's go ahead and start over to get Android up and running. So what I did here is when I downloaded Cordova, I installed Cordova in my USR local projects folder, and underneath the LIB, let's go there for just a second. Inside of Cordova here, you can see inside the LIB there are different types of platforms. Like I said, Android, we have Bada, okay, BlackBerry, Symbian, WebOS, Windows iPhone, iOS. All of these give you the capability to develop your code one time and run it everywhere, as I'll show you in just a minute. So let's go here to this particular command prompt here, and let's create an Android project. Kind of push them off to the side here. What I'm going to do is, at this point, inside of the Android bin folder where the binaries are, you'll see that there's a create shell script in there. What we want to do is we want to use that. There are 3 arguments to do the create. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to create where you want to store this project. Okay, so in this case it's going to be under USR local projects my seasons 2 is going to be the name of the project. So let's do this. Let's go back a couple of levels here inside of projects, and so now what we're going to do is in the second argument here, this is what they call is your package name. For you folks that are unfamiliar with IT, package is typically a unique name or a unique naming convention to uniquely identify what you're up to. Typically, if you're working for a company, it will be something like com dot let's say I'll use as an example Tastykake. Okay, com.tastykake.mobileapps, and that is your package name. If we were developing My Seasons 2 under that package, it would be com.tastykake.mobileappsprojects, and then that would uniquely identify My Seasons 2 to be connected with that particular package. We're going to use My Seasons 2 as the name of the particular application project, so I'm going to hit enter here, and I should see My Seasons 2 appear inside of the projects folder. And if you can see it right here, here's My Seasons 2. And if you look inside of that, Cordova generated all of these artifacts that you need in order to get your project off the ground. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go over to a separate workspace here, and let's bring up Eclipse. I'm going to do that. And this should load in just a second here. Now, what's going on here is, since Eclipse is going to be editing Android, Android is going to be Java-based. A little bit later, when we go over to iOS, we're going to be handling this inside of an Objective-C. In any event, we're not going to be coding in those native languages. We're going to be strictly sticking with the HTML5, or the HTML, excuse me, the CSS, and the JavaScript. As a result of that, it's going to be a lot easier to code this up and for folks to be able to follow and understand it. You'll actually get to see the power of using that particular Cordova framework. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to close this, and this was left over from a previous example, so I'm going to go ahead and delete them off once I get the menu to cooperate with me. And okay, I'm going to delete him off right there. Okay, now what I have here is My Seasons left over from the previous webinar, complete with its artifacts inside of it. And now what I'm going to do is, with that particular project that we just created over here from the command prompt, I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to bring him in as a full-blown project. And I'll show you how to do that. One of the things that gets mentioned inside of that web page I directed you to is downloading the Android Developer Toolkit. Make sure that before you actually start developing this project inside of Android, that if you go inside of right here, and I'm on a Mac right now, but if you go to Preferences, you have to make absolutely sure that you see this inside of your preferences. Android should be there. If it's not, go follow that page again and download the Android Developer Toolkit and make sure that that's installed with your Eclipse editor. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new project. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a project from existing code, an Android project from existing code, which is underneath this Android section right here. For the wizard, we're going to point to the directory that we just created it to, which is USR local projects for me. You can put it anywhere you want. No matter where you put it, that's where you have to ultimately point to in order to bring it in as a project. So I'm pointing to My Seasons 2. I click Open. And I want to check this box off here. It says Copy Projects into Workspace. And I click Finish. And it brings in My Seasons 2 that was generated from Cordova. If I look inside of here, I see Android Manifest and Properties. If I go over here, I see Android Manifest, I see and Properties. So it successfully brought it in as a project. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the Virtual Device Manager. This is a simulator here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start him like this. Let's kick him up to, let's say, a 6 for me. It'll be different upon your particular device, but I'm just going to make him large enough so you can see the simulator in action. And once I bring the simulator up, we're going to launch the My Seasons 2 mobile app, and you'll get to see what that looks like on an Android simulator. Now, if I wanted to, I could actually deploy this to an Android device as an APK file, which is a binary, a true native a binary application. I'm not going to go into that in this discussion, in this webinar, mainly because that's really outside the scope of developing once running everywhere. But I would invite you that if you want to know how to do that, follow developer.google.com, and they'll give you step-by-step instructions on how to do that. It's very easy to do. You typically have an Android device connected through USB cable to your computer, and when you run it through Eclipse, Eclipse will prompt you, hey, do you want to run it on your device? And if you say yes, that's what it will do. It will actually deploy the APK to your device, and you'll actually get to see it run without having to run through the simulator. So it's very cool. It gives you a real-world experience as to how your native app is going to run on that particular Android device. One of the things that you'll also see here too is with this particular simulator, versus the iOS simulator, I find it to be really more memory intensive. I don't find it as snappy. It looks like it can be like a little bit jittery at times. I guess it just comes with the territory. But if you don't have an Android device, it does the job, and that's one of the things that you just have to accept as a trade-off while this continues to load up here. In the meantime, you can see what's going on behind the scenes over here inside of your Eclipse environment if you make sure that it's selected for Android here. Typically what will happen is when it comes up, you'll actually get to see some feedback go on here inside of the console section. What I'm going to do here is unlock this, slide it over here. Okay, it's going to be unlocked. Okay. Now, even though My Seasons 2 is here, it was left over from a previous version. What I'm going to do is, for the time being, I'm going to rebuild and show you how that gets done. And as a result of that, we should be able to make sure that the Cordova is operating properly. So what we're going to do here is we're going ahead and we're going to launch this. As a result of that, we right-click on this project here, and down here in Run As, we do Run As Android Application. So what that will do is it will compile everything that is inside of assets. You'll see a www folder. Inside of there's an index.html. And inside of this index.html, the cool thing is that Cordova will take care of running this for you. I'm going to close this out. It seems that it wants another AVD. As a result of that, it says no compatible AVD was found. So let's go ahead and run that again. Relaunch. So let's do this. Let's go into, if you ever get this, the way to get out of it is go into Run Configurations. And then what you can do is over here under Target, you can basically pick any active AVD. If you want to prompt to pick a device, you can do that. If we go ahead and run it, I want to use this one here. I called it Stupid Android. I call it stupid because I don't find it to be particularly smart, but nonetheless, I just call it. It's my personal preference. So I'm going to launch an emulator here, and it's going to bring up the My Seasons 2, which, if everything goes right, it should have Apache Cordova up here in the header, and it should tell us that the Cordova device is ready. And let's see how it looks. And it's bringing it up. As you can see right here, you'll see a header for Apache Cordova, and we should see this device is ready. And once we see that here, then we know that it's launching correctly. Android seems to be taking its time here again. But anyway, one of the other things I wanted to point out about the Android development environment too is that it does have a lot of great debugging on it. It's got this thing here called a logcat. If you take a look at it, it's giving you all of the events that are going on right now. Let me, if I could here, expand this a little bit. Uh, for developers wanting to know what's going on with the application, it's just chock full of really rich information. If I only wanted to take a look at, let's say, like debug messages, it would screen that out. If I wanted to take a look at only errors, it would screen that out. So it's really good for a development environment to have this kind of a tool available for your development of the mobile app. So let's see how we're doing here. Let me go over to console. If anything comes up here in console, it says it's waiting for the Android development environment to see the emulator up and running. It should be any second now. One of the other things too, while we're waiting for that to come up, is that it's very easy to develop, get off the ground developing here, because primarily most of the time you're going to be developing inside of HTML and JavaScript. And we'll see in a little bit how to get this thing to actually get this app to talk to the low-level device features through the Cordova framework is a lead pipe cinch. A couple of lines of JavaScript and we're pretty much ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and unlock this. I'm going to move it over here and unlock it. It's going to catch up with me sooner or later. Like I said, it typically runs a little bit slower than the iOS simulator, but again, it does the job. And when you're developing and you're doing it on a shoestring budget, you don't want to have to go out and buy devices if you can help it. So we're waiting for it to come up here. It says it's installing it, and pretty soon it should tell us that it's starting the activity. The activity is more or less the main class that gets fired off inside the Android development environment or inside the Android operating system to let you know that your particular application is in fact being run. So it should be any second now. It says it's starting the activity. Take a look here, and we should see that the device is ready and the Cordova is in fact ready. So here we are. Apache Cordova device is ready. Good. All right, we're off to a good start here. So now what I want to do is I want to take this index.html, and as I said before, I want to take the previous My Seasons mobile web app, and I want to be able to take that code from there and leverage it here for this particular mobile native mobile native app. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's copy this code here from the previous create a mobile app in 60 minutes, and let's put them inside of here. I'm going to delete everything out, and I'm going to paste them over top of the Cordova project we had just generated. Okay. Now, what we should see here is it should look identical to the previous webinar. If you haven't, by the way, if you haven't seen that particular webinar, go out and take a look at it. It's less than 60 minutes long. It's chock full of great information how to get up and running pretty quickly with little to no experience in developing mobile apps. I'm going to call this My Seasons 2. And because we don't have a header and a footer that's comparable to the mobile web app footprint that we had last time, we should see a little bit of gap when we run this. So before we run it, we have a couple of small changes to make. Number one is we need to copy over all of these particular files that we had before. So for instance, let's go ahead and copy over the CSS. Let's do that. Let's take us up here. I'm going to copy over this area here. It's going to tell me, are you sure you want to overwrite? I'm going to say yes. Yes, I do. Okay. Now, even though I have the Cordova -2.1.0 JS here, I typically like to put him up where I think he belongs inside of this JS folder. It's my personal opinion that I should, it's really helpful to have all of your particular assets in separate folders by their type. So I typically would put all my JS files inside of the JS folder, a CS inside of the CSS folder, so forth and so on. I have an image folder here. I'm going to go ahead and take the images from the last project create mobile app in 60 minutes. I'm going to copy them. I'm going to bring them up here, and I'm going to paste them over top of what we have in this particular project. Yes, I do. I want to overwrite that. Okay. So at this particular juncture, I have everything I think I need to get this thing up and running. The only thing I need to do is, now since I copied this over to this JS, I need to include them here inside of this particular project. So I'm going to take them inside of my HTML, and I'm going to put in Cordova. Let's go ahead and type that in. Cordova dash 2.1.0. Okay, we'll save him. If everything goes right, this should launch, and we should see what we saw the last time in my previous webinar, which is 4 seasons. And so let's go ahead and, by the way, once you run this as an application like I did before here, you can either go back and do it that way, or if you want it as a shortcut, up here under this run symbol here, this little circle with an arrow pointing to the right, you can go ahead and do that. I click here, and I can see that my Seasons 2 is at the top, so I'm going to go ahead and run that. And again, it asks me if I want to use this one here. Maybe what I want to do is in the future, maybe what I'll do is, let's go ahead and use him, and we'll click OK. Maybe what I'll do is have it so it doesn't ask me for that choice anymore. So let's see what's going on here in the console. It says it's uploading it after it built it, it's installing it, and it should run the activity any second now. So let's see what happens here when it launches my Seasons 2. Oh, boy, this looks horrible. What happened here? Oh, I know. The CSS. Maybe I should probably take care of that as well. But it's not really the CSS. See, what's throwing you here is something I forgot to do, which is I forgot to bring over the jQuery. I forgot to bring over the jQuery, which was from the previous project. So let's go down and do that. That's my bad, but we can recover from that pretty quickly. Okay, so down here under JS, yeah, here we go. So again, my bad. Let me copy that. Copy. It's easy to recover from mistakes here using this, where trying to debug a native mobile app inside of the native code, whether it's Objective-C or Java, is a challenge in and of itself. This is pretty easy to recover from. So I'm going to paste those guys inside of the JS folders where they belong, and that's where I'm referencing them. So let's go ahead and try that again, okay, and see how it looks. We're going to go ahead and run it. It's going to prompt us to see if we want to run from stupid Android. I say we sure do. And now I'm going to put them back here. And let's see how he looks. And the console should tell us that it's launching that activity. And there it is. Here's my Seasons 2. Ah, much better. And there's that extra real estate I was telling you about. Before, the problem was when we were rendering the mobile web app from a device, we had the Safari browser, since we were using an iOS simulator. And as you remember, with a Safari on an iPhone, you have a URL here up at the top, and then you have the buttons down here at the bottom to let you go back page by page. If everything goes right, I should be able to click on any of these pages here like I did in the previous webinar demonstration and get to that particular season. In this case, I clicked on fall. I went to fall. This is good. Okay, so I'm able to pick up the code and able to use it here immediately. And I invite you to do the same thing, just so you can become quickly acclimated with how things are laid out as far as a mobile apps project, using the HTML to frame your mobile web app, the CSS to decorate it, and the JavaScript in order to handle events. So we can see the CSS here took care of the decorations with the header and so forth. As far as the event handling was concerned, we did a click. I'll do a click here on Spring, and the click was handled and it moved to that page accordingly. If you want more information on that, again, I invite you to go back to the previous webinar, create a mobile web app in 60 minutes, and as a result of that, you'll be able to see how it was put together with very little effort whatsoever. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to handle for this. I'm not going to go into responsive forms. I said that's going to be another webinar that I'll have in the future. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to compensate for the size of the content section, so we have the header and the footer properly located where they should be. So what I'm going to do is go through everywhere here where I had 312 pixels. I'm going to upgrade it to 400 pixels, and as a result of that, I should see everything in its proper place. So let's go up here to the top, and let's save it, and let's go ahead and run it again, and let's see what happens. If everything goes right, we should be able to see that it comes up with the proper real estate in the proper location. It should just take any second now. And as a result of that, My Seasons 2 ready to launch. And here we go. There we go. Header and footer properly located where they should be. Let's go into winter and see what that looks like to make sure that everything is where it should be. It is. Fantastic. Okay, good. It's a very simple app, and we're not going to get into the complexities here, but I will guarantee you that everything right here that you're seeing here is being built into a binary, so it truly is a native app. And we'll see the same thing occur on the iOS simulator as well. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, now since you've seen HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in motion, what we're going to do now is we're going to take Cordova, which is our fourth ingredient, our Cordova framework, and in there what we're going to do is we're going to actually get some device information. So instead of me fat fingering my way through this, I actually have some of the code laying around here. I'm going to take it, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it in where it belongs. And what I'm going to do here is, after I make sure I have it readable, let me expand this here. What I'm going to do is explain a little bit of this. Inside of the body tag, we trap for another event. This is an event handler here, which is the onload event. And when you bring up a particular web page, in this case it's index.html, every time a page loads inside of an HTTP protocol, a web browser, so to speak, what will happen is the onload event for that browser will be triggered. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to have init. Is what we're going to call the name of that particular function. We're going to call it init since we have it up here. And what I'm going to do is put together what they call an event listener. And I'm saying, hey, if I get the device ready event from Cordova, I want Cordova to have this function as a callback. And this function is defined right here on device ready. What I want to do here is I'm going to temporarily comment out these lines of code here. And what I'm going to do is show you that when that event does occur, that we do get an alert here saying Cordova is ready. Now, even though we saw Cordova is ready the last time we did launch, this is a little different. What you saw before was an index.html page. What I'm doing here is showing you that when this event occurs, this particular callback will be executed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run this. So we're going to go back here. We're going to run from here. We're going to pick our Android virtual device, and which is right here. I'm going to go back to home, and it should launch the activity any second now. It's installing it. This APK is the actual binary file, the native code that's being deployed to the simulator. So as a result, we're going to see this launch now, and I should see that Cordova is ready, will be displayed as an alert. And sure enough, there it is. There's the alert for Cordova is ready. So I'm going to click OK on that. Very good. So now we know we have Cordova engaged. So now what I'm going to do is go back here. I'm going to take him out of the equation. Okay, I'll just delete him completely. And now what I'm going to do is Cordova's got all of these cool bits of information I can get on the device. I can get the name of the device. I can find out which version of Cordova I'm running. I can see what platform I'm running on, what the unique ID is for that particular device, and what version that device is running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to code all this up. I'm going to drop it into this particular division here called device info content. So let's go down here and create, since we have that real estate at the bottom, let's go ahead and create something here where we can click on it and get that information. So let's go back up to here. Let me get some more editor real estate here. Okay. So down here, what we'll just do is copy this winter section, and what we'll do is we'll call that device info. That's what we'll do. And we'll actually give it a header called device info. And we don't need an image for that. We'll just take the image out. And I'd say for this what we'll do is put in something fairly innocuous like click here for, whoops, spell it right, for device information. Simple enough. Okay? Then what we'll do is we'll come down here and we'll copy, since we were picking on winter before, why not pick on them again? We'll take this winter section, which is that completely separate winter page that link takes you to. And in this case we have here device info. Very important that when you have an href inside of these mobile web apps, that you use, in this case we have a hashtag here. What happens is the DOM that is being used by jQuery, the document object model is what DOM stands for. The document object model will be looking for that particular hashtag, and it will go down to that particular page. So in this case, it finds this data role equal to page. This was, by the way, covered in my previous webinar. The device info is here is the ID, which is where it will come to. So we want to put here device info to make it consistent. And then down here, what we want to do is we can completely gut this, and we can put a nice ID in here of device info content. Since we have the content right here, we have to make sure that this device info content is the same device info content spelling, and I am spelling challenged, as what we had up here. So if everything goes right, we'll be able to display all that device information on a completely separate page when we click on that link. And so let's go back here. We're going to save it. We're going to go ahead and run it. And take here, yep, let's use that AVD. And it's compiling, it's installing it. Let's give the emphasis here. Okay, so My Season 2. And it's launching. It seems to take a long time to launch the first time, but then subsequent executions after that, it picks up speed, but it is quite a memory hog. So here we are. We have device information down here at the bottom, like we had programmed it to do. And if everything goes right, I didn't break anything else. So let's click on summer and make sure we can at least get to summer. And here's a picture of Bethany Beach in Delaware. Don't you wish we were still feeling that way right about now in the fall? Nonetheless, let's go back. And let's go ahead and take a look at this device info. So we'll click here for device information. If everything goes right, we should be able to see all that device information we had. So the device name, since we're not on an actual Android handheld smartphone or a tablet, it has here SDK for the Software Developers Kit. The device here is Cordova 2.1.0, and as you remember, that's what we have here, what we loaded with Cordova 2.1.0. We see that this is an Android platform. The unique user ID or device ID for this is this guy right here. And the device version is 4.1.1. Very easy to find out if that's true or not. Click here on the project name, and Eclipse down here at the bottom has this little area here called Properties. So click on that. And if you go up here to Android, you should see that right here where the checkbox is, we have Google 4.1 as its platform. So 4.1 was there, and we see 4.1 over here as well. Very good. So the devices, at least the information from Cordova, is consistent, and this information is only available from the device to your JavaScript layer right here, only because of that Cordova framework. Otherwise, you would have to go down to the low-level Java code, and you would have to write that in order to push it back up to the JavaScript. I didn't have to write one line of Java. I didn't have to worry about compiling it, making sure the syntax was correct. This was all done through the Cordova framework, and this was like I said before, once you have this copied into your particular project, all of these things that are available from Cordova can be found out at PhoneGap or Cordova. Go ahead and Bing it or Google it. You'll see that there are APIs out there. They will show you how to use these APIs for your project in order to get to those low-level features for the devices. Okay. All right. Very good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill the emulator here in order to save a little bit of memory. So I'm going to close him. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Eclipse, I'm going to close Eclipse, save a little bit of memory here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to where we had generated the project for Android. I'm going to do the same thing for iOS right now. Now I typically will put my iOS projects inside of USR, Local Projects, Apps. So as you can see right here, there's no My Seasons 2 here. So I'm going to go ahead and generate that the same way I did for Android. You have a create shell script. You put together the location of where you want that project to go, which is all the way over here. I know it's a little bit of a challenge to see this, but this is USR Local Projects My Seasons 2. The second argument you give is the package name. And then, of course, the last one is the name of your project, their mobile apps project itself. So let's do this. Let's go over to iOS, and we'll go iOS, and we'll go to the bin folder there, and let's go ahead, and I should probably have this laying around from the last time I was playing with this. Yes, I do. So as you can see right here, I have, again, the create for the shell script here, user, local, apps, projects, My Seasons 2. And then in this case I have the package name is com.sample, and again the name of the projects. So if name of the project. So if it goes right, it should create this mobile web app, or not mobile web app, excuse me, a native mobile app project. So let's go ahead and create it. And it looks promising because I did see My Seasons 2 pop up, and there we go. We have everything we need as far as we're concerned regarding iOS. There's the project file, the Xcode project file that we need, and as a result of that, what I'm going to do here is just a little bit of preventive execution here. I'll explain in just a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the www folder that we created here in My Seasons 2 for it's over here for Android. This is everything we've done in Android. I'm going to take this www folder here, and I'm going to copy him over to the iOS project, and we're going to be able to use the same artifacts except for one file, and that's going to be the Cordova JavaScript file, because Cordova abstracts us from each particular platform's inner workings. So even though the syntax is the same, the actual internals are different in how Cordova goes about talking to that particular platform. So let's go back into this iOS project I just created, and let's change this www to Cordova www. Okay, so we go Cordova.www. Okay. All right, good. Now, one of the things we've got to we have to realize here too is, so even though we created, let me go back here up to Android. Even though we created this My Seasons under Android, you may remember that we did bring that in as a project and we copied it to the Eclipse workspace. So we have to go all the way down to the Eclipse workspace here, and we have to look for My Seasons 2. Let's see here, My Seasons 2. There it is. And as a result, we look at the assets, and there's our www folder. What we're going to do is we're going to copy him, and let's go back to Apps inside of My Seasons, and what we're going to do is we're going to paste him right here. Okay. Now, that should have everything we had before, and if I look inside of the JS, we see that the Cordova 210 is there. However, the problem is we don't want that one. What we want to do is we want to use the one that was just created by Cordova for iOS, which should be sitting over here. So let's go ahead and take care of him. We'll copy him right now, and we'll take him back, and inside of, oops, I got outside apps, I shouldn't have done that. We were inside of Cordova www, and we copied this guy right here. What we want to do is we want to paste him over top of the JS that was in the Android project. So let's go ahead and paste him, and yes, we want to replace. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to take that Xcode project and we want to fire him up. So let's pick a different workspace here, and let's fire him up. If everything goes right, it should bring up Xcode, and Xcode should be able to load this project. I think you're going to see better results here with the iOS simulator, because the iOS simulator is much faster, much snappier simulator than the Android is. It must be that it's not just because I'm running on a MacBook Pro right now, but I think the actual simulator, I think, has better, it uses better memory techniques. And the other thing too is Apple actually put money into it. Google, it looks like, Google, since it's a freebie, Android Developer Toolkit is a freebie from Google. As a result of that, I think not as much attention was more or less paid to it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to expand this, and there's our www folder. Inside of there, if I click on index.html, you'll see My Seasons 2 is sitting right in there. Everything we had before is in here as well. On device ready, the Cordova, everything is there. It looks really good. Now, before you run this in Xcode, you should pick the scheme to be iOS, My Seasons 2, excuse me. And we're going to run the iPhone simulator here. So if everything goes right, we should be able to launch this. And as a result of that, we should be able to see the same code coming up. Now, the only thing I'm going to do a little bit differently here is that the particular height here was set for 400. Now, I know, again, we're not going to get into responsive, responsive design here for CSS, so I'm just going to quickly compensate for that right now. So I'm going to go through here, and I'm going to change all the 400 pixels that we had before, and I'm going to take them down to 352. And that should fit very nicely inside of an iPhone that's not running Retina. And let's change one by one here. And there's 352 here and 352 here. Okay? So we're going to save that. And now all I got to do is run it and see what happens. If everything goes right, it should look identical, short of me having to rescale it, of course, for the content section. But it should come up in an iPhone, and it should have the 4 seasons. I should be able to go season by season, page and paging back to the main menu. I should be able to then go down to the bottom. I should be able to see device info, and as a result of that, the device info should give me unique device information for this particular device. Even though, again, I'm running on a computer, the simulator can still simulate a lot of the inner workings of that particular device and that particular operating system. So as we can see here, I've got the 4 seasons that I had before. If I click on spring, it takes me over to spring. If I come back here to device info and I see it, I clicked on winter. If I go back to device info and click on that, again, here it is. The device name is iPhone Simulator. The device is Cordova 210, as we saw before. Here's an iPhone simulator. This is a UUID that is unique for this particular computer, I suppose. And the device here is 60. And as I said before, 601 is the most recent one. Why don't we do this just to be absolutely sure? We'll go back here to Home. We'll go over here, and we'll take a look at, I'm pretty sure that information's here under General and About, and let's take a look. Here's the version right there. The version is 60, and so it does match what we had inside of our particular mobile app, My Seasons 2. So you can see the seasons here again. I have them here. Here's winter. I go back. Here's the fall. And I go back, and there's device info one more time. And all of this was made available because just simply putting in a few lines of code here, and if you had an actual iPhone or an iPad device that you were deploying to, or an iTouch, it would bring up that information that was unique to that device that you would actually have to write Objective-C code in order to go grab. Fortunately, the syntax, again, as I said before, is identical. This device.name, it's got a name attribute here, a Cordova attribute. Each one of these attributes were properties. It's the same syntax that you used that we had over in the Android. So there's an example there. We developed it one time, and we were able to pick it up, and we were able to run it with very little. The only thing I did here, because of the lack of the responsive form, was I just changed the height. And we used the unique JS for this particular platform that we had seen. When we go back here and we take a look at the Cordova underneath lib has, for each particular platform, they have their unique JS that you would use in order to develop your native mobile app for that particular platform. Okay, so that said, for more information, if you want to contact me, feel free to do so. I'm making this available at www.brainchildren.net under Polyfill HTML. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at webinars@brainchildren.net. My name is Bill Girten. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Looking forward to having more webinars in the future that for people that are really hungry. I'm going to be doing plugins next. It's going to be called Plug and Play, and plugins are going to take us to the device's features into a completely new dimension. We're going to be able to do some really cool stuff, such as video and audio and all sorts of cool things like that, geolocation. So stay tuned. There's more for that. There's more for this kind of action to follow. Thank you for tuning in.